So now we're dealing with how to construct the frequency distribution table. So back on our discussion or on our presentation, we have 8 steps to follow. So the first step is to make an array. It's optional. So in making an array, we have to arrange the values according to their magnitude. So whether it's highest to lowest or lowest to highest. So if you're asked to do that, all we have to do here in Excel is to select first all information that we have, then click the sort and filter. So from that, we have a sort from smallest to the largest value. Yun yung rule na lang na i-follow natin. So that would be our a filtered or array of data. Then the second step is to find the range. So range typically is the difference between your highest value and the lowest value of a certain data set. So to find first which is the lowest value, so we have a formula of equal sign, then min as a abbreviation for minimum. That would be the function. So after that is select again or range of data, then close parentheses, click enter. So we have here the lowest value is 61. So for the highest value, the function would be equal sign, then max, open parentheses, then the data range that we have. You can also type that. So I have here from A2 up to A51. Then close parentheses, enter. So the highest value here is 96. So to find the range, that would be range is equivalent to highest value, ano yung cell niya for the highest value, minus the cell corresponds to the lowest or minimum value. So the range is 35. Fourth is to estimate the number of classes. So you have to remember that the number of classes is simply a reference. That means, kung ano yung makompute natin na value for the number of classes, that would be the minimum number of possible class intervals that we have to make. So, pwede siyang mag-exceed. Pero, technically, hindi tayo bababa doon sa na-compute natin for the number of classes. And those value depends also to the behavior of our data. So there are chances that we can compute for the number of classes that is expressed in a fractional form or medyo hindi siya exact, hindi siya whole number. So if your data or the behavior majority of your data is a whole number, so that means the number of classes must be expressed also to whole number. If your data is or has one decimal place or one decimal value, so the number of classes and the class size also follows that kind of behavior. So in this case, for us to compute for the number of classes, we have the formula of k is equivalent to square root of n. So n is the number of observations. So let's find how many observations do we have. So that is equal sign, then count, then select again the range of your data. So that is from A2 to A51, then enter. So I have 50 observation in this case. So for the number of classes, that would be equal sign for the function of square root here is sqrt parentheses, then select natin nasan ba yung information natin for n or the total number of observation, then we have here 7. So that is 7. Number of class size or the class width. So in computing the class size, we have to find the ratio between the range and the number of classes. So yung number of classes na gagamitin natin ay hindi yung naka-round off. So yung gagamitin natin is the actual computation for the number of classes. So that is equivalent to range divided by number of classes. Then enter. So we have 4.94. So since whole number yung value natin, we have to round up the value or round off the value, I mean. So that is 5. So after setting this, pwede na nating malaman yung lower limit. So in some textbook, you will read that there's no particular rule on how we determine the first lower limit. So dito, para lang maging generalize tayo, gamitin natin yung smallest value doon sa ating data set or doon sa information na meron kayo. So, na-determine na natin kung ano yung smallest value na meron sa ating information or data set. So, yun yung gamitin natin as the first lower limit. That would be 61. Then, to determine now the succeeding limits or lower limits, all we have to do is to add 5 from the previous lower limit. So, since 61 yung nauna natin na lower limit, add natin yung class size na 5. So, 61 plus 5 is 66. So, para hindi tayo yung actual na parang mag-a-add and so on, gawin natin dito is to select the first two value, then alamin natin uli yung number of classes. So, yung number of classes ang magsasabi kung ilang lower limit yung kailangan mong magawa. So, we have 7. Ang nakikreate pa lang natin dun sa frequency distribution table is 2. So, we still have to add 5. So, drag na lang natin. So, again, you have to select the first two lower limit, then drag down na lang natin yung ating selection box. So, we have third, fourth, fifth, sixth, and 7. So, the 7th lower class limit is 91. So, after doing that, nasatisfy na natin yung number of classes, kailangan nating alamin yung upper limit. So, yung upper limit would be the number before the second lower class limit. So, a number before 66 is 65. Then, same process, after determining the first upper limit, add the corresponding class size. So, in this case, our class size is 5. So, 65 plus 5 would be 70. Apply, same process. Select the first two value, drag down the highlighted cell. So, we have 91 to 95. That would be the 7th class interval. But the thing is, the highest value that we have is 96, and it is not part of the 7th class interval. So that means you have to add another class interval for us to get or to obtain the information from the highest value. So that would be 91 plus 5 is 96. 95 plus 5 would be 100. So this is our class limit. Then, in determining the frequency, we have to count how many items falls under a specific class interval. So, for example, I have the first class interval with values from 61 to 65. So, kailangan kong hanapin yun sa dataset. Ilan yung value from 61 to 65. So, as we can see here, we have 2, that is 61 and 62. So, yun yung nakalagay sa frequency. So, para maiwasan natin yung pagbibilang, gumamit na rin lang tayo ng function dito sa Excel. So, select muna natin yung empty cell under frequency. So, kailangan yung katapat ng mga class interval na yan ay maselect natin. So, after doing that, click po natin yung mismong fx dun sa formula bar. So, after clicking, we have this option. So, the default of this is yung most recently used. So, since kanina, ginawa ko na rin yung step dito, kaya naka-all na siya. So, pag hindi pa naka-all yung sa inyo, paki-select po yung all, then go through the portion of select a function. So, click muna tayo anywhere dun sa select a function na portion, then type natin yung frequency. So, after doing that, ayan po, naka-highlight na frequency. Then, sa-select na natin nasan yung array niyan. So, Pag nandyan na sa tapat ng frequency, click yung OK. Then, for the data array, ang inilalagay po natin dyan ay yung mismong value nung ating, or yung dataset natin, yung range ng dataset natin. For the beans array, ito naman po yung reference kung saan magbibilang ng value. So, para mabilang yung values na kino-consider natin, ang isa-select natin doon sa beans array is the upper limit. So, let's go through the data array again. Select the portion for your data set. So I have here the range from A2 to A51. For the beans array, select the portion for your reference. So yung reference natin would be the upper limit. So doon lang po tayo sa 65 up to 95. Hindi na natin i-consider yung last value for that, since yun yung function or yun yung sinasabi doon sa ating function. So, hindi natin basta pipindutin yung OK or basta mag-click ng enter dito. So, since this is a function argument, we have to use the functions by holding the control and shift button of your laptop, then hit enter. So now we have this frequency. So that means the values from 76 to 80 is 11. For 81 to 85, that would be 10, and so on. Then for the class mark is the midpoint of the class. So it's a typical value that describe the specific class interval that we have. So later on, when we go through the topic about the measures of central tendency for group data, malalaman natin why do we have to consider a certain typical value for each class interval. So now, to compute for the class interval, we have to get the sum of the lower and upper limit of a specific class interval. So, kunwari, add natin yung item from 61 plus 65. After that, or after getting the sum, you have to divide it by 2. So, I would highlight 61 plus 65, then close parenthesis, divide it by 2. So, the middle value for 61 and 65 is 63. So, since I have formula here, drag ko na rin lang po yun hanggang dun sa 95 to 100 na class interval to fill in the portion for class mark. Then, for the class boundaries, it is treated as the true class limit. So, it omits the gaps for specific values. So, meron lang tayong rule na fino-follow pagdating sa class intervals. So, if you're dealing with lower class boundaries, all you have to do is to subtract a certain constant value to the lower limit. For the upper class boundaries, you have to add the same constant that you use in determining the lower class boundaries to the upper limit. So, pag whole number daw, ang ina-add at sinusubtract natin to determine CB or class boundaries is 0.5 or 0.5. If you're dealing with values expressed with one decimal place, so you have to use 0.05. If it's two decimal places, that would be 0.005 and so on. So, in this case, whole number naman siya. So, for the lower CB, 0.5 yung isusubtract natin. So, this is equal sign, select the first lower limit, then type in yung constant value na kailangan nating subtract or i-add, so that is 0.5. Then, for the upper class boundaries, select the first upper limit, then add the value of 0.5 or 0.5. So, select ko lang yung parehas na limits na yon, then i-drag ko sa pababa. So, ito na po yung aking mga lower class boundaries and upper class boundaries. And kung mapapansin natin, kaya sa tinitreat na true class limit dahil nga nawawala yung gap, So as you can see here, the first upper limit is 65.5. Then, nag-overlap siya doon sa second class lower boundaries na meron tayo. So, 65.5 din po yun. So, magkakadikit siya in certain illustration. In computing the relative frequency, so that would be the ratio between the frequency and the total number of observation. So, yung single item for the frequency, i-divide natin by the total number of observation. This is equivalent to, so yung first class frequency natin is 2 divided by the total number of observation which is 50. So dahil lahat ng value na yan, lahat ng aking class frequency na na-consider kanina ay i-divide ko by 50, gagawin ko dun sa formula, lalagyan siya ng dollar sign. So yung dollar sign ay i-hold niya yung certain cell na yun. So yun na yung magiging reference natin. So, as you can see here, yung walang dollar sign ay yung value for the frequency. Yung lalagyan ng dollar sign is a portion for the total number of observation. So, that is 2 divided by 50 is 0.04. Then, drag po natin yan. So, 7 divided by 50 is 0.14. 4 divided by 50 is 0.08. 11 divided by 50 is 0.22 and so on. And tandaan din po natin that the sum of the relative frequency is always equivalent to 1. So, to find out what is the sum, so lagay po natin yung function under the portion of relative frequency, the function equal sign, sum, then close parentheses, select the range for the relative frequency. Then after that is close parentheses, hit enter. So we have 1 as the value. For the relative frequency percentage, so that is just, or we can determine that by multiplying the relative frequency by 100%. So equal sign, select the cell for the first class or relative frequency, then multiply it by 100. So we have 4. So drag down again. So the sum also, this is equivalent to sum of the relative frequency percentage would be 100%. So, lagi pong ganon. For the less than cumulative frequency, so accumulation of values from the smallest number of frequency, yung magiging basis natin dito. So, to find that, we have equals, then sum. So, select this portion, then colon. So, yung nilagyan natin ng colon na yun, yung last value for the reference natin. I mean, the first value. Lagyan po natin siya ng dollar sign. So, after po niyan, close parentheses, we have 2. So, after nun, dadrag na lang natin yung ating value. So, ang nangyayari kasi dyan, in manual, if we have the first class frequency, which is 2, kakopy lang natin siya dun sa first less than cumulative frequency. So, after determining the first less than cumulative frequency, this value will be added to the second frequency. So, 2 plus 7 would be 9. So, yung sum nung first and second, nakatapat siya dun sa second less than a cumulative frequency. Then, yung 9, add natin by 4, we have 13. 13, add by 11, that is 24. 24 plus 10 is 34. 34 plus 14 is 48. 48 plus 1 is 49. 49 plus 1 would be 50. So, yung clue na binibigay ko sa student is, para masabi mo na tama yung ginawa mo, is that yung first frequency natin is similar to the first less than frequency. And the last less than cumulative frequency would be equivalent to the total number of observation. So for greater than cumulative frequency, our reference here is yung bottom part. So yung last frequency. So in this case naman, kung ano yung huling frequency, yun naman din dapat yung huling value for greater than cumulative frequency. So dito, tinitingnan natin is the values greater than to specific accumulated frequency. So same formula, sum, then select the last class frequency, then colon, yun po uli. Then yung first na naselect nating value, yung I-10 muna. Lalagyan ulit natin yan ng $sign. So, siya yung magiging reference point natin in accumulation. Then, close parentheses after doing that. Then, after that is drag natin na pataas yung ating formula. Ayan po. So, dito naman, ang clue nyo, mag-start kayo sa total number of observation. Then, isusubtract natin yung specific frequency to determine the next greater than cumulative frequency. So, let's have, for example, the total observation is 50. Subtract ko siya dun sa first class frequency of 2, we have 48. So, ito na yun, nakalagay dun sa second greater than cumulative frequency. So, 48 minus 7 is 41. 41 minus 4 is 37. 37 minus 11 is 26. 26 minus 10 is 16. 16 minus 14 is 2. 2 minus 1 is 1. So, that would be all for the construction of frequency distribution table.